By the time I was 4-year-old, I started getting into boxing. They wanted to burn the energy off of me. And my dad was the local amateur boxing coach. By the time I was 11, I was able to have my first amateur fight. I was doing good as an amateur. I was top two in England every year. By the time I was 17, I was just itching to turn pro. You know, on my 18th birthday, I turned pro and boxed 7 days later. I feel like my career started when I come to Dave Coldwell, because that's when I was in meaningful fights. I feel like that night I was unstoppable. It was my home show. I sold the place out. It was Peterborough Arena. I was topping a bill live on Sky Sports for the first time ever. You know, as a kid growing up, that's what dreams are made of. Prove to myself that I was good enough to win that title and do it in the fashion that I did, and then share it with my dad and that belt. And I said, "That's for you. That's yours." That was like a big emotional moment. I want to do the same, but with a world title. Boxing is probably the most grounding sport in the world. It might look glamorous on TV. The reality is not only hard physically, but it's hard mentally.
Welcome back to the KultureKast podcast. My guest today is professional boxer and reigning WBA International Featherweight Champion. Welcome, Jordan the Thrill Gill. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No
How are you?
worries. I'm good. It's an honor to have you, and thank you for sharing some time with me. I know, like, obviously, I keep up to date with your Instagram. You're always training. You've got a busy schedule, so thank you for carving out some time.
No problem. The graph never ends, does it? The graph never ends, but we're getting through it.
100%. I made the same joke when I was speaking to Nick. That's my best David Diamante impression right there. Of Jordan the Thrill. Where did that nickname come from? The Thrill. Is it just because it rhymes with Gill?
I think so. It kind of just sort of stuck. Somebody once said it. I can't remember even who said it, but somebody said it once and it sort of stuck. So, you know, it rhymes. It's a sort of fitting name, whereas everyone's trying to come and take my head off and kill me. And then I'm trying to bob and weave and duck and dive out the way and sort of pick them off. So it's probably a fitting name.
Yeah, definitely. Boxing can definitely be called a thrill if nothing else. But as you may well know, the way I like to start podcasts, the way I like to introduce yourself is basically take a trip down memory lane. Let's talk about baby Jordan, about your upbringing, about your cultural background, all of them sort of things.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I was born in a place called Huntingdon and lived all my life in a little place called Chatteris, which is in Cambridgeshire. It's sort of halfway between Peterborough and Cambridge, probably in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of people have never heard of it, but it's quite a agricultural area. There's a lot of farming that goes on. So yeah, my mum is English. My dad is Punjabi. He's Indian. He was born in Cambridge. Both his parents come over from India in the 70s. No, in the 60s, sorry. So yeah, he was sort of born in Cambridge and lived there, and then come to Chatteris and met my mum, and then one thing to led to another, and then I was born, and my sister was born 20 months before me actually, and yeah, we sort of just grew up there, and by the time I was 4-year-old, I started getting into boxing because my dad sort of was a local boxing coach, and that's that.
Yeah, I heard you say in an interview before that you were a ball of energy when you were growing up, that they had to basically take you to all these sporting events and like swimming before school and just to sort of sap you of your energy. Is that basically how you got involved in it?
Yeah, I had a lot of energy. I was running around when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was causing problems at school. I was playing kiss chase with the boys, the girls, the teachers, the pets. I was a bit of a nightmare. So they wanted to burn the energy off of me, and my mum took me swimming before school, and my dad was the local amateur boxing coach because he was an amateur boxer himself, wanted to turn pro, and then really never got the opportunity. So he took over training in all the amateur boxers in Chatteris, and yeah, he took me to the gym with him from 4 years old, and sort of just knocked about, and I saw the older kids and I saw how they were training and what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't working. They used to give me digs and beat me up, and by the time I was 11, I was able to have my first amateur fight.
I'm guessing because obviously like your dad will be sort of a community figure in that sense then, if he like obviously he's like head of the boxing coach at the amateur gyms and things, and a lot of the kids will probably know him from that. So I'm guessing there was from the sounds of where you've grown up, it does sound like a very English area. I'll put it.
Yeah, it was a really like white dominated area, but you know everyone was really friendly. When I was at school, I think there was 1,500 kids in school, and there's probably 6 or 7 of us that wasn't fully white. So yeah, it was white dominant, but you know everyone was friendly. It was all welcome, and it was a good place to grow up, a nice part of the world because you know, if you want anything luxurious, you've got to travel. You want, like, say, you want to go to McDonald's, you've got to travel half an hour to get to McDonald's. So, you grow up in a city, you like probably kids don't think twice of it. And like now, I'm based up in Sheffield most of the time. Um, Everything's on your doorstep. We're living in the city, and it's like a luxury that we didn't have growing up. And I think it was a good way to be, good place to grow up, because you know so much greenery, so much freedom and like safety really as well.
Yeah, that's probably one way of keeping healthy is just make sure there's no McDonald's in the village.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the reason I wanted to bring that up is because obviously, when I've spoke to people so far, is some people have said I went to like a full white school and it was really hard and it was hard to assimilate and things. But it isn't always that case. Do you know what I mean? It's not always like, oh, I think sometimes like minorities, myself included, because I'd got a bit of racism growing up, but I think sometimes it's easier just to say like, oh, I'm the odd one out and it's not my fault and all these things. But there are places in the world, and probably more than there aren't, because negativity normally gets more press than positivity. But I'm guessing there'll be a lot of places like where you grew up where it is white dominated, but everyone's so friendly and everyone's so welcoming.
yeah. That's it. I think you're always going to get little incidents here and there, and I don't think anybody growing up had never been called a name, but just because we're probably different, they chose that certain name to call us. But it is what it is, isn't it? If I was really fat, they would have called me fatty. If I was, you know, ginger kids get, oh, you're ginger nut or carrot top or something like that, and you know, kids will be kids and people will be people. But I just think there's good and bad in everybody, and I think there's more good people, especially where I grew up, but probably in the world, than there is bad people. And I think if we treat everybody how we want to be treated, then I think the world would be a better place.
100%, that's it. But unfortunately, especially now when you'll probably know with social media and things, of obviously being in the limelight yourself, I think nowadays it's very easy to, and being a professional boxer, this probably applies to you more than anything. It's very easy to say something with no repercussions. Like if someone said something to you in the street, you wouldn't want to get punched in the face by a professional boxer. Do you know what I mean? But obviously, nobody's going to do that with a fake profile on the internet.
Yeah, that's it. We become easy targets, and I don't know what goes on in these people's lives where they think it makes them feel better to sort of have a crack at us or call us names or you know speak badly of us. But you know at the same time, what can we do? It is what it is. And I think in a world we live in now, it's so like media and oriented, social media wide, like it's everywhere. You can't. There's no escaping it. And I think everybody, because of social media, everybody wants sort of attention. And it seems to be people are doing more and more extreme things to get this attention. So like you see these YouTubers just doing stupid things and saying outrageous stuff because it gets views and the bar gets raised every time. So somebody has to outdo the last person's outrageous comment, and then it just spirals and spirals. And before you know it, we're living in a world full of mad people, and they're saying and doing mad things. And we're at some point, someone is going to get a big reality check, and you can see it all coming. But
100%. Especially, I think the YouTuber that you're like talking about is Jake Paul, because he's the one that's making noise in boxing, especially. And I've spoken about this on the podcast previously with an art teacher. She's like in her 40s. She didn't know anything about the Paul brothers, and but we were talking about social media and the big brother Logan, who fought Floyd. a few years ago. I don't know if you're aware of the thing that happened in Japan. Have you heard about that?
Was it when Floyd did an exhibition there?
No, the YouTuber. So Logan, this was when his numbers were increasing. He's got lots of yes men around him, and it's that thing that you're saying that he was doing some more fucked up shit every single video because the views are increasing, and he had to push himself further and further.
Is that when he went into the forest?
Yeah, the suicide forest, and that's the sort of thing where I think people will get a reality check, because after that it was very much like, right, hands off him, his sort of, and he's obviously had to go back and reflect and rebuild and all these things, but
It's absolutely crazy that someone can get to a point in their own reality where they think that's acceptable. And I
yeah.
think that's where like social media and everything sort of spirals out of control when people's own reality becomes, distorted. And sometimes, you do need a big reality check, and hopefully at that point you got it. I don't know too much about these poor brothers, or I don't really know too much about the big figureheads in social media, but or in the media, but all I know what's right and wrong, and that was definitely wrong.
100%, yeah. I think when it comes, because social media views now are money, and if you've got a team of businessmen around you who are thinking this will be good for views, which equals we get paid, then they're not going to say no, and they'll let the guy take the fall for it, and obviously they can take money. Obviously, I think that's a bit of speculation on my part as well, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes and things, but it did seem like that sort of was what happened. But for yourself, it's probably a lot easier to be grounded when you're getting punched in the face when you go into training and things like this. So I'm guessing you can't really take any days off in that sense.
No, that's it. I think boxing is probably the most grounding sport in the world, and it might look glamorous on TV, and you might get all the fanfare when you do fight or when you're training. People want to come watch and want to know who you're fighting and want to know where they can get tickets and want your team T-shirts and stuff like that and want a photo. But the reality is harsh. It's a harsh reality of the fact that you are going to the gym every day. You are slogging it out. You are having to get up early and eat spinach like Popeye. And, it's a very hard way to make a living. It's not only a hard physically sport, but it's hard mentally, and it's hard in a business sense to get to where you need to get to for the financial gains.
Sort of going back to your dad, he seems to be like the figurehead in this in your story as well, of obviously getting into boxing. So as you mentioned there, I think you had like around 93 amateur fights,
Yeah,
is what I've heard. Yeah, okay. Done my research before this, you see. And you got into it at the age of 4, and he was training you at the amateur gym, and then at around the age of 11 is when he stuck you in your first pro fight, amateur fight, sorry.
yeah, that's right.
It would have been a bit excessive to chuck you in a pro fight at 11.
I've had a hard time.
Yeah, exactly. So what was, do you remember any of that stuff? Like, do you remember being nervous before amateur fights or anything? Or was it just a bit of like, we'll give this a blast?
It was more fun for me. I was the one, like a lot of people look at any sportsman with, or like children playing sport where their dad's their coach, and expect the dad to be pushing them into it, or being very harsh with them, or dragging them to the gym when they don't want to go. And it was actually the opposite with me. I was dragging my dad to the gym. I was like, come on then, let's do another round, or give me that fight, or let's see if we can beat this guy up and stuff like that. So I was always very keen. So when it come around to my first amateur fight, I was not nervous at all. I didn't really know what to expect. I fought a kid that had probably 5 or 6 fights on his home show in Bedford on a Monday night, and it was the 5th of October 2005. And I boxed him on a Monday night. I got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember turning up at school on a Tuesday. I won. I beat him, and I thought I was a hero. And then I walked into school and I said, "Oh, good news! You'll be good at this. Cross country day." So I'd had about 3 hours sleep, and I had to run the cross country at school. So it was a nightmare. But yeah, I wasn't really nervous for my first fight. I was nervous for probably my second fight, because in your first fight, you don't really know what to expect. You've been to amateur shows before and you've seen other people do it, but you've never been there and done it yourself. So after my first fight, I sort of knew what was coming, and I knew it was going to be hard. So in my second fight, I was nervous, but not so much. As it went down the line, I was doing good as an amateur. I was top two in England every year. I was putting in good performance. I was boxing for England, beating world champions and British champions all the time. So every time I had a fight on a club show, there was no one that really wanted to fight me. So I was having to fight older guys. I was having to fight heavier guys, guys that was way more experienced than me. And that's the way you get experience yourself. And then sort of by the time I was 17, I was just itching to turn pro. And that's when it finally come, on my 18th birthday, I turned pro and boxed 7 days later.
Are you allowed to turn pro before 18 in this country? I'm not aware
No,
if you... Right, okay.
no.
So you had to wait for that birthday, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think in Ireland, I'm not sure if it's changed. In Ireland, you used to be able to be 17, but it might be 18 now. But I know, like in Mexico and places like that, it's 15.
Yeah. You hear like people like Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, and people like that have obviously, and Canelo and things have been professional for a lot longer. I think a lot of them went to like Mexico to have a few pro fights before actually like being allowed to box in America.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. It's like some fucking wacky shit that is. Do you know what I mean? I would have traveled across the border just to have a couple of fights. But you were obviously like a really decorated amateur, as you just mentioned there. So I've got like 7 national finals here, 1 ABAs, NACYPs, and obviously boxed for England in them 7 years. And as you say, you turned professional relatively early. But a question when you were speaking there that popped into my head was so featherweight is 9 stone, isn't it? But obviously,
Yeah.
when you were like 11 to 17, you're obviously growing, so you probably would have boxed like at smaller weights than that as well. Is it hard to be at the smaller weight category when you're like growing up, because you're always going to be against people who are sort of still filling out the frame and always going to be sort of bigger than you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. A lot of kids sort of kill themselves to make the weight so they can be the biggest they could for the weight, and you see it time and time again. And also, like when you grow it, everybody sort of grows in different stages. So you see some kids with completely opposite body shapes to others. So you might see 2 kids that are like 60 kilos, and one of them be like 5'4", and the other one could be like 6 foot, just because people's bodies are so different, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you grow at different stages and you fill out at different stages. But for me, I never knew anything about nutrition. I never dieted ever when I was amateur. Probably only the last sort of year that I was amateur. I just sort of ate what I wanted, trained hard, and whatever I weighed, I turned up at. So my first 2 years in the championships, I was 52 kilos, which is about, I don't know, probably about 8 stone. And then so from the age of 13 onwards, that was when I went from 52 kilos to 60 kilos, which is like 9.5 stone, 9'6" that is. So I boxed at 13 at 9'6", and now I box at 9 stone. So
Yeah.
I actually boxed heavier when I was 13 than I do now. So it's hard for people to wrap their head around. But then I maintained that weight at 60 kilos from 13 all the way up until I turned pro. And then like by the time I was turning pro in the championships, I'd look through all the weight divisions in my year group, and I'd say everybody in the final, probably 8 out of 10 of them I'd boxed in previous years, just because they've grown and I've stayed the same weight. So like now there's a guy on GB who's called George Crotty, and he's a super middleweight. And I remember I had like a trilogy with him when I was amateur, but right down at the lower weights.
It is crazy. Like one of the first boxers that I was able to speak to was Inder Bassi. I'm not sure if you're
Yeah.
familiar with him. Yeah, and when we were talking about his amateur career, he was like he beat Daniel Dubois in amateurs. And I was like, hey, you must be pulling my leg here. Do you know what I mean? Like you're I think he's a welterweight he fights at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's beaten a guy who in the amateurs would have been super heavyweight by the end of it. And obviously, like as a heavyweight now, I'm thinking, hey, what the fuck's going on here? You must be chatting shit or something. He was like, obviously, when you don't think of Daniel Dubois as like a kid, obviously you just think of him as he is now.
Yeah, it's a nice name to have in your record there. So when you see him fighting for like British Commonwealth title, or whatever, and he's a massive heavyweight, 6 foot odd, and you can say, I beat him. And
Yeah.
lose like, what's he, 10.5 stone wet through.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be fair, he did flex on that podcast as well. It was a proud achievement for him, and rightly so, because obviously Daniel went on to do some really really cool things. When you turned professional, as I was saying to you, I recently spoke to Nick Webb, and he was saying, and asked him a similar thing of, did he feel like excited or nervous in his amateur debut, and you like yourself, he was that you didn't really know what to expect, and he didn't really feel nervous. It was just more just going with the flow. But what was the difference like from your pro debut? Because obviously that's when there's a bit more weight. You're sort of accomplished as an amateur. There's a bit more expectation. There's a bit more pressure. Were you a lot more nervous for that? Could you feel any of the pressures with your professional debut?
I did, but not as much as people would have thought. I don't think, because there's extra pressure there because you've got a lot of people there to see you. It's the first sort of time that you're a professional. You want to impress everybody. The promoters are there, the TV companies are there. You're expected to do a job, and I think part of the reason why I didn't feel as nervous is because, when I first turned pro, I was fighting people that I probably would have beat when I was 14. And that's no disrespect to them, but I was sort of held back for way too long. I boxed a lot of meaningless fights that I didn't really want to be in. A lot of fighters that I boxed were journeymen when I was coming through, and it's only since I went to Dave Coldwell that I've been in real quality fights and winning these championship fights.
Yeah, that was a point that I was going to make a bit later on, because obviously I was watching a lot of your fights recently in the lead up to this, and it did seem like when you switched from the Ingle gym to the Coldwell gym, that's sort of when you did sort of crack on a lot more. And I think that's what, not just like obviously not just myself saying this, but yourself saying this, and a lot of people like in the boxing industry, quote unquote, were saying that at the time as well. I think during that fight with the one for the WBA
Yeah,
title the first time in Peterborough, and I
yeah.
think that was mentioned. I was literally just watching that 20 minutes before we started, sort of just getting myself amped up, and they were mentioning that in there as well. Was that a massive difference for you when you switched over to Dave then?
Yeah, it was huge. It was like I had a purpose. For me now, I look back and that feels like a completely different lifetime. That feels like a different career. I feel like my career started when I come to Dave Coldwell, and because that's when I was in meaningful fights. I got 2 fights. I hadn't boxed for 18 months before I went to Dave, so I went to Dave and I got 2 fights in quick succession, and I was straight in with Jason Cunningham. So I'd not boxed past 6 rounds. I'd never sparred more than 8 rounds. And I did a 10 rounder with Jason Cunningham, who's now the current European champion. So that was at the time was a British title eliminator, and I've come through that. I beat him quite well, dropped him twice. So for me, that was the start of big things. And once I got that fight, then things started moving very quickly. And Dave's the man that made it happen, because before that, it was like I had no purpose. I wanted to these big fights, but they just weren't coming, and no fights were coming at that stage. So I was sitting around twiddling my thumbs and training every day, going to the gym and grafting for no reward.
Is you didn't sign with Matchroom until that point either, did you? Or were you with Matchroom beforehand as well?
No, I didn't sign with Matchroom until I won the Commonwealth title against Ryan Doyle.
And having someone like Dave obviously probably would have helped that, because a lot of his fighters have been with Matchroom before, and then when you're with a promotional outfit, it is easier to get these run-outs all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dave's got a very good relationship with Eddie Hearn, who's the head of Matchroom. I wouldn't have got the shot at the Commonwealth title if it weren't for Dave. So he's got the right connections. He got me the shot against Ryan Doyle for the Commonwealth, and that was down to me to win it. And because I did a good job and I stopped him, that's when Matchroom got interested and got involved. And they it's still, when you sign with them, they don't just give you runouts here, there, and everywhere. They want you in good quality fights because it's costing them money, and they don't want to invest in fighters that aren't gonna have the potential to reach the top. So it's good to be with a promotional outfit, yeah. And these fights are going to come thick and fast now. Like my next fight's going to be for the European title, which is awesome for me, and then hopefully push on end of this year or early next year and get a world title shot.
Yeah, that would be really, really good. I don't know like how to say this without sounding really too much fanboyish, but I'm a massive Eddie Hearn fan. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's when I get to speak to like people like yourself and things, I always want to try to like find out as much as I can behind the scenes of boxing, just obviously being a boxing fan in general. And what do you think of this? I feel like this will probably be beneficial to you as the signing with DAZN, because now you get a fight not just here. I've seen that obviously you fought on an Italy show recently, and that's obviously through Matchroom and DAZN in there. And obviously Fight Camp was the Reece Bellotti fight as well. And although obviously they weren't with DAZN at that point, like in America and things, it's all broadcasted there, so you're still getting that cash injection, which helps the fighters like yourself get out a bit more frequently. What do you think of all of that sort of move, I guess?
It's very interesting because obviously Eddie had a very good thing with Sky. They had a very solid relationship over the years, and Sky did a good job in broadcasting. But basically, DAZN have come in with all this money, and they've basically made an offer that he couldn't refuse, like The Godfather.
Yeah.
And it's going to allow Eddie, who's now started to take control of the whole media production and everything, sort of mold it and monopolize it in a way to be able to put out what he wants to put out. He can make the fights that he wants to make because the budget's big. There's if two world champions are asking for an extra 100 grand on their top of their purse to make that fight, then he's got the money in the bank to pay it. Where Sky might have said, "Oh, do you know what? That's a bit too much." DAZN will be like throwing money at it. And for the boxers, that's good. Well, not only because there's more money in the pot, but because there's going to be more broadcasters and more competition between the promoters. So, the game's going to be raised again. So there's going to be more opportunities, more shows, more opportunity to box around the world. Is going to be bigger fights being made, and it can only be good, I think. But time will tell, and plenty of promoters or in any sport of taken big risks and it failed. But I think that Eddie has got such a drive and such a passion for it. I can't see it failing, because I think anything that he with Matchroom, that's his family business, and he'll do anything to see it strive and survive. So if he had any doubt that this DAZN deal would not work, then I don't think he would have gone for it. And I think it's going to be an exciting time ahead.
100%. Like obviously Fight Camp's coming up again in a couple of weeks. Obviously you fought in the last one, but this one's going to be the first ones on DAZN and things as well. So it's going to be really interesting. And I think the best thing on the fan side of it, like for myself, is it's £2. It's $1.99. Do you know what I mean? It's obviously cheap for us at the moment. Obviously that price will probably go up. Yeah. By the end of Fight Camp, I'm pretty sure he's already said at the end of Fight Camp it's going up before the Warrington Lara rematch.
Right.
Is that like a show that you could potentially be on? I know you just mentioned the European title shot there. Is that something coming up? Because I had the name written down. I'm not sure if this is correct, or I've just seen this on a dodgy website. But Anthony Gargo I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, Anthony Gargo. They're in private negotiations at the moment, so the EBU may be mandatory for that title. So if the fight couldn't get agreed, it would have gone to purse bids. But the fight's been agreed. There was talks of it going on the Josh Warrington undercard, but I think from what I've heard now, they're going to be doing it in Spain. So the champion is Anthony Gargo. He's Spanish. He fights in Spain a lot, and he's a champion. So I've got to go to the champion's backyard and take that belt away from him. So that's going to be probably a week or two after the Josh Warrington card. I know they're just sorting the dates out now, so it's going to be very exciting and a good little Spanish trip.
Have you done your research on him? Have you figured out what how to beat him? I'm guessing you and David probably already conjured up a master plan.
No, I'll do it later.
A bit closer to the fight when it's is that hard for like when a fight is getting talked about and it's not actually finalized to sort of get ahead of yourself, or do you wait until like right, signed, sealed, delivered, now I'm going to start and focus on this guy? and in the meantime, I'll just prepare myself for whatever comes.
Yeah, I think what you have to do is sort of put yourself in a position where you're just improving day to day on yourself and making sure that you're the best that you can possibly be, because it's all well and good preparing for one style, but at the same time they're preparing for you and they're watching you, so they might come into the ring and fight completely different to how you've ever watched them fight. And obviously everyone has habits and everyone has sort of little things that you pick up from, but when they're in there with you, I always find it's completely different to when they fight everyone else. I don't allow them to do what they normally do, or force them to do something completely different. So I tend to make sure that I'm the best that I can be, and then sort of just be able to deal with it quickly when it happens and unfolds in front of me.
Yeah, 100%. I think again that's similar sort of to what Nick was saying. Is they've never been in the ring with him, and that's the way that he sort of mentally prepares himself beforehand, like of not tailoring him to yourself too much to the opponent, but was thinking that they've never been in the ring with somebody like him. And obviously you've said the sort of same. It's fascinating because as I keep on saying, like from the outside looking in, it seems like sometimes fighters obviously tailor themselves specifically to different opponents, and maybe it's like some fighters do it and some fighters like to stay themselves. We've sort of like jumped towards the end because we're pretty much at present day, but let's rewind it a bit more and go back to the pro sort of journey. And 26-1 now, and the first sort of the Commonwealth title against Ryan Doyle was at 23, I think, 23 fights in ish, or 24 fights in.
Yeah.
And that was a 7th round TKO. What was that's sort of like the first sort of decent step up, would you say?
I think probably the first major step up was when I boxed Jason Cunningham in a British title eliminator. I think that was I had one fight in between that and the Doyle fight. So yeah, that was my first major step up, because under the circumstances, like I'd had 2 fights to get a bit of momentum before that fight, but before that, previously I hadn't boxed for 18 months. I was young. I think I'd had 18 or 19 fights. It was my first time going the distance, going 10 rounds. I'd never gone past 6 before. I'd never been in with a championship fighter. The guy was, at the time, 2-time Commonwealth champion, and now he's the current European champion. So he's actually achieved in his last fight, by beating Gamal Yafai, what I want to achieve in my next fight. So at the time, it was a very hard fight. He was a very experienced fighter. He was a former senior WBA champion as well. So it was a tough fight. So that was my first major step up. And, I answered a lot of questions that night. And then I had another tick-over fight on the undercard of Hay versus Bellew 2. And then I was straight in with Ryan Doyle for the Commonwealth title. So, that was a major step up. He just knocked out Bellotti in emphatic fashion, who was, Eddie's favourite featherweight at the time. So he had the momentum. He was a hot ticket at the time. And for me to go in and just obliterate him like I did, do a proper, job on him, just box his head off and broke him up and stopped him, I really announced myself that night. And that's the sort of fights and performances that I want to build on and continue doing. So straight from there, I went in with a dangerous Mexican, Emmanuel Dominguez, and that was another step up in the case where he's a good international fighter. He's a tough Mexican. He's had a lot of fights and good experience. He had range. He went like 9 or 10 rounds with Emmanuel Navarrete. And the added pressure I had was, it was my home show. I sold the place out. It was Peterborough Arena. I sold 1,000 tickets personally. Everyone was there to see me. I was topping a bill live on Sky Sports for the first time ever. And for me, as a kid growing up, that's what dreams are made of. And that added to the excitement, added to the pressure, but at the same time, it added to the performance, because I feel like that night I was unstoppable. I would not have been beat that night at all.
Oh, that's a fight that I was gonna. I wanted to ask a few questions about because, as you mentioned there, like it's in your hometown. Sky Sports headline act for WBA International Featherweight Title, and you definitely like answered every question, and you can see the grin on your face when you're talking about it. You obviously reminisce like very fondly about it. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is, can you appreciate moments like that when you are striving to sort of eclipse them, if that makes sense? Like, it is obviously going to have a special place in your heart, but obviously you still want to progress way further than that. So can you sort of reminisce and like, or is that, do you, in your mind, is that complacency if you think about it too much?
No, I can reminisce now. Now it's done.
Mm.
I wish it's like anything at the time. I feel like everything I do is like a big thing to everybody else, but to me it's not. And at the time, every step that I take, I sort of take it all into my stride, and I don't think about what I'm doing or how big the occasion is or what a big thing it is. When really, when I look back, that was massive, and I didn't actually appreciate it. I wish, even when I won the tournament, when I won the fight against Jason Cameron, when I won the WBA International Featherweight, I look back and I think, wow, that was a big moment. I should have really took my time and enjoyed it a bit more. But when you're in that moment, you've got one sole focus, and that's to win the fight, and that's to perform to the best of your ability. And that's what I did. So, I never really fully appreciated it, but now I look back, I really do. And it doesn't make me complacent, because now it just drives me more to think I would love to get back to that position where I am headlining in Peterborough, because now it's a different story where I think I wouldn't just sell 1,000 tickets personally. I think I'd sell out the whole stadium. And if anything, we could probably go to the football ground, especially if I had a European or world title fight. So it's a big motivation. It's something that I'd love to do, and it's something that I strive to get back to Peterborough Arena, or back to fighting in Peterborough, whether it's at the arena or the Western home ground where the Peterborough the posh play.
That's something that's always quite cool. Like, obviously you've seen like Tony Bellew go to Goodison and have his night against Macabu, and there was talks up here, like I'm from Newcastle, and there was talks up here that Lewis Ritson might have been going to St James's Park, but I think
Yeah.
his past few fights have sort of like put that on ice for now. Hopefully he can like obviously get back to that point where hopefully he does have a fight there, because it would be like electric and ecstatic. Like, there is something special about just having them in football stadiums. I think obviously it's larger capacity as well, but them sort of nights just stand out a lot more. And obviously for the fighters themselves, like Lewis Ritson's a massive Newcastle fan. I think anyone who likes sport is normally a Newcastle United fan if they're born in Newcastle. And for yourself, obviously Peterborough would be quite special as well. I wanted to ask a specific moment in that fight where, obviously as a fighter, how much does the crowd get to you? Because there was the second round on the bell, pretty much. A few seconds beforehand, you'd already sort of rocked him. And on the bell, you hit him with a flush shot. He's like wobbling way back to his corner. And you can hear the crowd is like ecstatic. They're erupting. Now, you haven't got him out of there yet. You still need to go there. And obviously the next round you did, and the crowd goes even wilder then. But how much control do you have to have in that moment? Because you showed like you didn't rush in at any point. You dismantled him really like a nice pace. But how much like sort of control, and how much like do you have to tempt yourself for that?
Uh, yeah, you have to have a lot of control, but at the end of the day, it's what we train to do, isn't it? So I feel like, when it's like I said before, when everyone's watching, it's a big thing, but to
Mhm.
us, it's like you just take it in your stride. And you sort of have to have control, because I did get him out in the next round. I did stop him, but there's every chance that he could have recovered, because he's a tough Mexican. He could have recovered and carried on till the 12th round. You never really know these guys, so you have to remain composed. But at the same time, when I was going back to that corner, I remember hitting him, and to be honest, I didn't even look at him. I knew I hurt him with that shot, but I didn't even look at him. You can see it on the camera where he rocked and sort of stumbled back to his corner, but I was focused on getting back to my stool, making sure that I got my 60 seconds rest. But at the same time, the roar of the crowd when that happened, knew he was rocked. Um, but that energy sort of just soaks into your body from the crowd, and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but when you're in that position, you sort of soak that energy up from the crowd, and it sort of adds to you. It adds to your strength and sort of power. You think there's no stopping me tonight, and that's how it feels.
Like an extra burst of energy, sort of like that you absorb it in.
Yeah, it's like a superpower.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, and to be fair, I didn't even notice that. Like, and as you say, you were walking back. I think Dave was probably looking at him more than yourself, because I remember Dave was just looking at him wobbling to the corner, and obviously in the next round you sort of finished it basically. And then when you get that announcement, as you sort of alluded to there, you don't really think of anything in the moment, but surely when someone's like raising your arm and putting a belt around your waist, you can sort of look and sort of appreciate that moment. I know you had like a really heartwarming embrace with your dad afterwards, and like in the ring, where it was like you're hugging all your team, but there was a bit more of a special moment between you and your dad there. Are they things that you soak in at the time, or is it still just a blur because all the adrenaline's in there?
Yeah, I think it's different points at different after different fights. There's sort of the emotion hits you, because 9 times out of 10, the journey to get to that fight is a very hard one. So like every camp is tough. So when it's done, and that feeling of relief, where obviously all through the camp you look forward to the fight, but you still got pressure on you to make sure it goes well. You really want it to go well. But when it's done and you've won that title, you've got your hands raised, that sense of relief is like no other. And then sometimes it hits you in the ring, sometimes it hits you in the change room, but it's like a weight's been lifted off your shoulder because you've done it, and you've achieved the goal that you set out to do. For me, when I won the Commonwealth title against Ryan Doyle, that was for me a massive moment, because I'd had all these meaningless fights, and this was the first time, apart from Jace Cunningham, that I was going to fight somebody who was, it was a really big title. Commonwealth title was a massive title for me to win, really prestigious. A lot of good fighters have had it throughout the years, and after all their meaningless fights, if I'd have got to that point and not won that fight, that for me would be like, right, I'm not good enough, I need to stop. And for me to prove that to myself, because obviously all your life you're going to have people say, oh, you're not good enough, you can't do this, you might as well pack up, this and that. For me to prove to myself that I was good enough to win that title and do it in the fashion that I did, and then share it with my dad as well, because from 4 years old he'd put all his time and energy into making me as good as I am, and struggling to put me in the right gyms, or struggling to get me the sparring, and working his nuts off to have the money to get a train ticket for me to come up to Central and train and stuff like that. For me to look at him in that ring and give him that belt, and I said, that's for you, that's yours. That was like a big emotional moment of him. There's very rarely a moment in my life that you can really say, you know what, I've done it here. I've achieved something that no one will ever be able to take away from me, and I want to give it to my dad, because without him I wouldn't be there. And I think in that moment he really appreciated it, and it was a very emotional time. But I want to do the same, but with a world title.
100%. Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about sport in general, is them emotional moments that just come out, and you can't really help it, sort of thing. All the time and the energy that obviously you and your dad have spent in the gym, and the pride that he must have from coaching you at 4 years old all the way to like a big fucking title. Do you know what I mean? Like in your home fucking stadium in a packed out crowd. It's obviously really like an emotional time. You've mentioned world title a few times there as well, and as I've sort of like alluded to before, is a few of the guests that we've had on. Well, pretty much all the boxers we've had on are Indian, except for Nick, obviously, in the last one. And a lot of their goals are to be the first world champion of Indian heritage. And there seems to be like a nice little new crop, basically, of sort of, and but in terms of the professional game, I think it is safe to say that you're the furthest in your career and maybe the closest to that goal. Is that something that you have ever been aware of? If like somebody's told you, like, if you win a world title, you'd be the first one like of Indian heritage to do so?
No, do you know what? No one's ever said that to me, and I've never really thought about it. I just think all I think about is the world title, and if I can win that, and not only for me, not only for my dad, but for Dave, who's put all the time and effort into me as well. You know, we have very hard days where things don't go right, and he has to sit and take his time and explain things to me. And you know, as a, like boxing is individual sport where there's not a team, like it's not a team sport, but it still have a team environment. So like the amount of time that Dave puts into me, the amount of time that Dad put into me over the years, my strength conditioning coach Danny Wilson, Alan Ruddock, my nutritionist Scott Robinson, we're like a big team, we're a big family, and for me, it wouldn't be an achievement for me; it'd be an achievement for everyone. For me to be able to give back to my dad, to Dave, especially who's made me the fighter that I am now, would be awesome. So yeah, it's not something that I think about being from Indian heritage. I just like to win it, and then somebody tell me that, oh, you're the first Indian to do it. So yeah, I'd love to do it, and I think that I've got every chance of doing it, and I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that I'm in the best position to take that title and bring it home.
100%. Well, when that person afterwards tells you, or you just have to remember me telling you first, innit?
I'm hoping you're going to be the one there that says, yeah, do you know what?
Yeah, yeah. I'll when you've got your world title fight, I'll come down, buy a ticket. I'll be like in the crowd. Jordan, remember me? We did that podcast. Yeah, you're the first Indian world champ now. But because it is one of them things where like I've spoken before to say like Gaz, and shout out to Gaz from Blue Corner Boxing for helping sort this out, this podcast as well, of like the crop of Indians coming through. Obviously we've never really been in this sport as big as say like Pakistanis, Indian heritage fighters haven't really been there as Amir Khan and Prince Naseem, but it seems like we're pushing on that door, and sometimes it takes, and I know obviously like Commonwealth titles are impressive, like international titles are impressive, but sometimes it does take that world championship status to sort of propel that next generation to be like, look, actually, if there's a parent that's thinking, oh, maybe we don't want our Indian kid to be in boxing, someone to look up to as a world champion that comes from a similar background to yourself, so who looks like you, can sort of make it a bit more achievable and spark that inspiration into the next generation. No pressure though, no pressure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it could happen, couldn't it? It could happen that the fact where if I do become world champion, or when I do become world champion, um, I will be a positive role model. I feel like I'm not going to be going around swearing and you know, shouting at people. I'm going to be respectful the way I am. I'm just going to be myself and be polite and try to be as articulate as possible. And hopefully, you know, children's parents will see that. And if they're, you know, from the same heritage as me, or if they're half Polish or half Dominican Republic, whatever, they might look. So, you know what, he's half caste, or he's mixed race and he can do it, or he's a polite young man and he can win a world title. I think maybe this is a good thing for me to put my son or daughter in, to teach them discipline. And you know, that way we might get more people in the sport. I see when Nassim Hamid won the world title and first come along, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Yemenis flocking to Sheffield, to the Winkerbank gym to train and be like Nassim Hamid. So, you know, there's every possibility that we could inspire a generation. But even if you don't inspire a whole generation, you could make an impact on one person's life, and you know that could make all the difference in their life. And for me, that'd be awesome.
100%. And something that I didn't actually realize literally until today was that Dave's actually from India as well. Like he's from Indian heritage. Have I read that correctly? He's from Calcutta.
Yeah, I believe he was born in Calcutta. So yeah, we done a little piece, an interview for the Indian Express.
Yeah, that's the article that I read. So yeah, that was it.
That's right. Yeah. So I was there when we was interviewed together, in fact, for that. So no, it was interesting to hear Dave speak a little bit about it. So obviously, I don't know too much about Dave's story in that sense. So maybe you'd have to get him on the podcast and talk to him in that way. So you know, it's good. So we might be the first world champion trainer and fighter team to win a world title on. And I think that might be a long-standing record when it happens.
100%. Yeah, it would be really interesting because obviously, like there's 1 billion people in India, and obviously the Indian Express got in touch and did that article, and I didn't even know that beforehand, but I'd love to have Dave Coldwell on, and obviously since you train with him all the time, maybe you could put a word in, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I might put in a good word for you, mate. Yeah, I know he gets about 100 requests a day.
I can imagine.
I'll tell him that I've done one with you, and I'll put him onto you.
Mate.
I'll tell him to read the message request.
Yeah, definitely. I'll slide into the DMs after this one. After that like incredible night in Peterborough, you wanted to get back out really quickly. And as you said, on the Peterborough night, you sold over 1,000 tickets, and there's like, I'm guessing there was a element of you didn't want to let your fans down, because on your first title defense, it was food poisoning on the day of?
Yeah, I was really unwell that night, so I'd boxed 10 weeks before, and then had a couple of weeks off and got straight back into camp. And they said, "Oh, there's an opportunity to fight in early May, against another Mexican." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. I want to fight." So I trained hard, got down to the weight and made the weight. But after the weigh-in, the food that I was eating, it wasn't sort of absorbing into my body. So like, I looked big. I put the weight back on, but it was all like there was water under my skin. Like I was just watery, and like the food wasn't actually absorbing. So like I was just sort of getting rid of the food, and the water wasn't sitting right in my body. And I learned a lesson that day. I was on the toilet all day before the fight, and I didn't want to let anyone down. Like you said, I'd had all these meaningless fights. I'd finally got a big break, and I don't want to pull out and let down the promoter, the fans, the TV. I was topping the bill again in Nottingham that time. So I didn't want to let anyone down. I thought, you know what, I'm good. I got a bit carried away with the hype. I thought, I'm too good. I can't get beat. This guy can't beat me. I'll be all right. Once I'm in there, I'll be fine. That's what I was telling myself. Once I'm in there, I'll be fine. I'll just put it back in my mind. And as soon as I got in that ring, or even warming up on the pads, my timing was all off. I didn't feel myself. I didn't feel great. And then I was boxing the first round. I was getting caught with shots that I shouldn't have. Well, I would never get caught with. And then I got hit with a body shot. And I never, ever, in my life, I've never been dropped with a headshot. And I've been dropped probably twice in sparring in my whole life with body shots. And he hit me with a body shot in that fight, and there was no resilience to it whatsoever. And I had no resilience from body shots. And it was like I'd never been in that situation before. And I was like, what do I do? So I tried my hardest to win that fight, and I got dropped. I kept getting up. I got dropped. Kept getting up. I had one round where I got back to my boxing and tried being a bit smart, and I won the round. But at the end of the day, I didn't have the resilience in my body to hold them shots. And I'd lost 3 10-8 rounds, and I probably won a couple of rounds, and I was definitely down on points. But there was a couple of rounds left, and Dave just pulled me out the corner, and I was like, oh no, let me finish the fight at least. But he probably done the right thing, because I wasn't going to win that fight. I had no resilience. I would have probably just taken more shots, and it's been a big rebuilding job. But I learned a valuable lesson that night. And despite feeling as bad as I did that night, and despite me probably making bad choices in the ring due to how I felt, I still did make them bad decisions. And me now, I'm a better fighter having gone through that experience, because I've learned when to not make them bad decisions, and when to do certain things in the ring. So at the time, it was absolutely devastating. But looking back, and I think when I look back at the end of my career, I can say that was a defining night for me. That was the fight that propelled me, or give me the know-how and the experience to become world champion. And I think that's what's going to happen.
100%. Like I can only imagine, obviously, if you have like an upset stomach and then you get in a body shot, it's probably it probably feels 10 times worse. Do you know what I mean? Like at that moment in time. And I've spoken about this a few times, obviously, with a couple of different other boxers. But I feel like there is too much pressure on that O nowadays as well, like that undefeated streak and things like that. Obviously, like with Floyd being so successful and having 15-0 and making $1 billion out of that, it's there's obviously a lot more pressure, and it doesn't. I feel like that's one element where, like, say, MMA and the UFC is quite good, is you can come back from a loss very quickly and sort of reestablish yourself, where boxing and boxing fans probably aren't as forgiving. Like when that O goes, it's sort of like, oh well, there you go, it's done now, sort of thing. But you've seen with like Anthony Joshua, for example, and you bounce straight back and you can go on and still do like amazing things. And I think that's where most people learn. Obviously, it takes a special kind of person to learn whilst you're willing, like Floyd, but most people do have to make mistakes to then rectify them. And in obviously a boxing ring, that does come, unfortunately, most of the time with losing, if it is like a mistake at high stakes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think too much emphasis has been put on the O. Floyd Mayweather didn't help that. But fair play to him. He's made his $1 billion and
Yeah.
up into the sunset. We can only dream of making $1 billion, can't we? But he's done really well. But I think boxing is getting back to that stage where people never ask me now. You know what? Someone asked me the other day, "What's your boxing record?" And I swear to God, I had to Google it. I don't know how, I forgot how many fights I had. And the reason why is because nobody asked me how many fights I've had, ever. They say, "Oh, what's your record?" No one says that to me, apart from once the other day. But what people want to know is, who you boxed, or who are you
Mhm.
fighting next? Because it's getting to the stage where now people just want to see big fights, just want to see good fights. And that's where, like you said, the UFC is so good, because you do come back from a fight straight into another big fight, and if you win, you get another big fight after that, and it's just like the competition's so high, and it's really really good to see that people aren't defined by one career loss, and can come back and be in huge fights, and one rectify, or two fight a guy that's better than the guy that beat him and beat them, because stars make fights, and it's horses for courses. So I think it's going to be going the way, especially with the zone now, where they're going to be
Yeah.
making massive fights, and champions versus champions, Brits versus Brits, or like having big nights where there's USA fighters fighting UK fighters, whether it's in USA or whether it's in England, wherever. I think it's going to be great, and it's going to develop the sport and probably eradicate that idea that the O is so important as well.
100%. A good fight night for your division would actually be Mexico versus England, because there's a lot of Brits in the featherweight division, and there's a lot of Mexicans in the rankings as well. But I think another thing that's helping that is coming off lockdown. Do you know what I mean? We've had a year and a bit of obviously no boxing, where some of the biggest fights probably should have been made, and obviously it fell through. Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua being the biggest example of that. So I think off the back of lockdown, people are probably getting a bit impatient with the big fights, and people duck and dive and dodge and whatever politics, and they just want to see the best face the best. Talking about lockdown, that fight that we've just alluded to, the loss, was just before, was the last fight before lockdown, wasn't it, for yourself? Do you think that helped or hindered you in terms of like mentally getting over that loss? Do you think the added time in between gave you more time to sort of comprehend what had happened, sort of get over it mentally, or do you think you would have preferred to just get out immediately afterwards and put it behind you, and obviously that longed it out a bit?
Yeah, I mean, for me, as a fighter, I wanted to rectify that loss straight away. So I wanted to get back into camp once I broke my hand in that fight. So I wanted to, after that injury healed, I wanted to make that rematch straight away. And for one reason or another, it didn't ever happen. And now the Tinoco has retired. But I wanted to rectify that loss straight away. I wanted to have the immediate rematch. I was confident that I would have beat him, being 100%. But it didn't happen. But I had a fight before lockdown. I fought in Italy in a 6 rounder in a comeback, and that went smoothly. That was good experience going abroad again. And then I was meant to be going in straight into a big fight later on that year. So I think I boxed in Italy in the September, and then I was meant to have a big fight in December in I'm not sure where it was actually, but then I just got struck down with a thyroid condition. So I suffered really badly with a very rare thyroid condition, and that sort of put me out until the following March, where I was meant to fight in March. On the first time, the second time, the David Avanasian and Josh Kelly fight was scheduled at the O2, and then a week before that got cancelled because of COVID. So then I had to wait from then all the way up until the 1st of August to fight Reece Bellotti. So in a way, that time was well spent for me because I made the best of the bad situation, and I trained very hard, and I improved on a lot of things, a lot of aspects. And then I was straight into a big fight with Reece Bellotti and an all British fight, a domestic dust up, which everybody loved to see. And for me that was a big fight, and I won that quite comfortably. And then straight into the Cesar Juarez fight, who really on paper and probably in reality was probably the best fighter that I've faced. He had fight of the year with Nonito Donaire a few years ago, and look, we've seen what Nonito Donaire's done in recent times. He's now world champion. He's the oldest bantamweight or super bantamweight champion in history. So this was a good fight for me, and a fight that's put me in a great position now to kick on.
100%. The fight with Reece Bellotti I wanted to ask about is interesting because obviously it was in fight camp, like I sort of mentioned before, and it was in the Matchroom headquarters sort of back garden space, and you fought obviously in front of thousands of people, and now you're fighting in front of basically no one because there's no crowds available, and obviously the fight afterwards as well, when you recaptured your title, that was in front of no one, but being in that garden sort of with Hogwarts, it looks like behind you and all that stuff. What was that what was that like for yourself?
Yeah, it was strange. It was a very a different environment. For me, it wasn't even the settings on fight night. It was sort of the procedure all week, where normally you're allowed in and out of the hotel. You just rock up fight week. You can going out and have some food from the restaurant or get your meal prep, whatever. It was so strict with all the sort of the quarantine. When you get to the hotel, you have to go straight to your room after your test. You can't leave your room until you've got a negative test. You can't nip out to get some food. Yeah, you're in lockdown in this hotel, and you have to be very well prepared. You have to bring your microwave. You have to bring your fridge. You're full of all the right foods that you need to eat. You need to make sure that you don't forget anything, because you can't just nip home and get it, or you can't meet somebody at the door to drop it off. And that was probably the biggest difference for me going into that fight, or my last two fights, the procedure with quarantine and that fight weeks. But on the night, the only thing for me that was different was the lack of crowd. But I think it probably affected me less than it had most fighters. So fighters that are really aggressive and fight for the crowd and fight with their heart on the sleeve, it probably affected them more, because they need that surge of energy from the crowd. For me, I had to be quite calculated and pick my spots in both of them fights, so it worked out quite well and I didn't get carried away. But I always prefer it with the crowd.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I was in Peterborough, that crowd gave me a big surge, and I'm looking forward to being back in front of a big crowd and performing to the best of my ability.
100%. I think we just had the announcement yesterday or the day before that full crowds are allowed back after this 19th of July, I think. So everything should be back to normal. I think they were waiting for that for the Usyk Joshua announcement as well, because they wanted to see if they could have capacity. And so hopefully by the time you fight, it'll be crowds back to normal and on a winning ways. during lockdown as well, you probably were able to train normally because you're a professional athlete, so you would have been like just in the gym as normal.
Well, the first lockdown, in fact, it wasn't normal. So when that fight got cancelled, it was meant to be the 28th of March 2020. So I think the 20th of March, they locked the country down. So I had to go back to Chatteris. And from then until mid-June or end of June, I had to stay in Chatteris. So for a good few months, I was training at home. So my dad luckily wasn't my amateur coach, so he had no idea what we could do on pads. So we were struggling to get everything we need. So at the start of lockdown, I made sure I had plenty of gym equipment ordered to the house. My sponsors sorted me out with quite a few different bits of kit, which was handy. And I was on FaceTime in the morning doing pads on the patio with Dave. So he's giving us pointers, telling us what to do, what not to do. So I'd like my mum holding the FaceTime with Dave on it, and me and my dad was smashing the pads and hitting the bag. We had a bag put ordered to the house, and we hung it on the side of the house. And I was hitting the bag outside every morning, waking the neighbours up. And then, like in the afternoon, I'd be doing my normally would be treadmill runs, but I had to do them like in the local park. So like a lot of outdoor running, and then like the strength conditioning sessions, I was on FaceTime with my S&C coach Danny Wilson. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but I feel like I adapted so well, and in a way I felt revitalized because I was doing what I love, which was training, but I wasn't deprived of being at home, which since I turned pro, I've always been away from home, so I can't spend a lot of time with my family, with my missus, etc. My friends. Obviously, in lockdown, I didn't see my friends much at all, but um, like I was at home and I was training, and my family was there, my missus was there. I had all the home comforts that I needed. I weren't, wanting for anything. So it kind of rejuvenated me. It's like one long holiday for me, even though I was still training. I was got in great shape. I felt fit as a fiddle. I was in a happy place, and I think that sort of allowed me to improve. And I think I definitely did improve in that lockdown because, like I said, I wasn't up in Sheffield training hard and thinking, oh, I wish I had my missus here, or I wish I had my family here, I'm missing home, or I was just like to see my friends, etc. So yeah, in a way, it was helpful, and I did make the best of a bad situation.
Was it hard not to like sort of get carried away like eating wise and sort of slip up nutrition wise? Like obviously a lot of people gained a lot of weight in lockdown. As some from what I've seen, you keep yourself obviously in the gym and so you don't bloat up in between fights and camps and things. But and like that particular situation was a bit harder than usual.
Yeah, it was. I think when the fight got cancelled, and we went into lockdown, there was no way of knowing when we was going to come out or when we'd be able to fight. But I think I give myself 5 or 6 days off where I just sort of sat and felt sorry for myself and sat eating crisps in my pants in front of the TV, probably all around my forehead and down my t-shirt. But then I sort of gathered my thoughts and I had to get my shit together, and Dave said to me, look, just stay on it because we don't know when we're going to come out. We don't know what fight's going to be available, but you're going to be first in line because you was on the first show that was cancelled. So just be ready, just stay on it. And there's no way of knowing when or where, but you've got to stay on it. And for me, that was hard because I like to have a goal in sight or a date in sight, but I trusted in Dave. He's never told me wrong before. Everything he said he's gonna do, he's done, and I believed in him. The fact that as soon as they had a show, then I'd be on it. So I trained my nuts off. I dieted really well. My nutritionist Scott Robinson was on board with me. He helped me so much during the lockdown. And Dave was a man of his word. He done everything he said he wanted to do, he was going to do. So the first fight televised on Sky Sports after the pandemic was my fight. I opened the show at Fight Camp, which was an honor to do.
100%. And obviously, like you were saying, it was best to keep ready because That's what Eddie was saying. Like anyone who was ready was going to get that fight, sort of thing, in the fight camps, and he was just kept on telling people to stay ready, and all the IFL interviews and things. He was always just harping on about stay ready and you'll get your shot. And obviously, it paid off for yourself because you won that fight, and then you went on to beat. How do you pronounce his name? Juarez.
Juarez, yeah. And not
Juarez,
only
yeah.
did it pay off in the Blotti fight because I was ready, but also in that fight because I took that fight at 2 weeks' notice. They rang and said, "Look, there's a slot. Do you want it? Are you going to be ready? You can fight this guy." And I was like, "Boom, yeah, I'm ready. That's a good fight." And we took it with both hands, and it put me in a great position now.
Didn't realize that was 2 weeks notice. That's fairly short notice even for like normal standards. That's really short notice, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very.
That's fucking nuts. Yeah, and then obviously now you beat Juarez, and European is next. I don't know if this is just me being silly, but I always thought that like British Commonwealth, then European, and then international titles. So is this like European title? Is it something that it's just because you wanted to get, or is it because it's a good name on the record? Because in my mind, is international title like not a sort of higher ranking than a European?
Um, it depends because sometimes it sort of depends who you fight for it. So it's a mixture of all them things where I do want the title because it's such a prestigious title. It is, if you win that European title, you are top 10 in the world. The governing bodies do rank you highly because you've got that title. And also, I do want to fight his opponent because, stylistically, it's going to be a good fight. And he is ranked very highly in all the organisations. So I think he's number 6 for the IBF. So beating him would give me a great ranking with the IBF. So, but at the same time, I think internationals are probably just above British level, and then I think the European is hard because European titles so prestigious. Not anyone can just fight for them. Whereas like you see a lot of prospects coming through and they're fighting for international titles, but it doesn't really mean that they're ready for world level.
Right.
And so you see a lot of fighters fight for international titles because sometimes that's the only title that's available and it's good experience, but they don't really fight anyone fantastic for it, and then they go back and fight for a British title after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a boxing in terms of politics wise is always a sticky one, isn't it? It's like the governing bodies, there's that many belts kicking about, and you just like it's hard to feel like when Loma was WBC and they put him to franchise, is like what does that mean? All of these things, and it's hard to sort of keep track of a sort of trajectory, if that makes sense. There's no real clear path anymore. It's just like right, grab what you can, and like you were saying before, nobody asks about your record or probably even like titles. It's nice to say, but it's who did he beat for the title. It's more about the fighters and the names on your record. Is that more fair to say then?
Yeah, I think so. I think boxing is a crazy business. I don't even call it a sport. I think amateur boxing is a sport, and professional boxing is a business, and it's a wild west. It's like a spaghetti western. There's so many twists and turns, and it's up and down, but it's unpredictable, and it's a hard business to crack. But we're trying our best.
100%. And hopefully by the time this podcast goes out, that fight will be announced, and obviously we'll all be cheering you on to, and hopefully you can bring home that European. Just before we wrap up, is it okay if I get your take on a few sort of divisions, a few fights that are coming up, and get your thoughts and opinions?
No problem.
I've asked this to a few boxers, but it seems like not many professional boxers watch professional boxing. So I don't know how clued up you'll be on all of these, but we'll start with your weight division. So Warrington Lara is probably going to be in September 25th, I think it is. Do you think it's revenge or repeat?
September 4th, Headingley Stadium.
Yes, sorry, that was it. Yeah,
Yeah,
25th. Josh Whitwick, my bad.
that's right. Yeah, no, it's an interesting fight. It can go one or two ways. I think I could see it going either a complete whitewash for Warrington because he's rectified his mistakes. He's not taking Lara lightly. I feel like in that first fight he sort of just waltzed in there and thought, it's going to be a comfortable night. I've not boxed for a little while, and I'll just get this guy out of the way and we'll be in some big unification fight. And it weren't the case, was it? So um, he could go in there and really be switched on, and he'll have to be. And I could see him either, stopping Lara because, Lara has a lot of vulnerabilities. His feet are poor, but at the same time he can whack. So yeah, he could stop him. He could beat him on points. But at the other side of the argument is that Lara has already beat him once. He might, have his number. He might just think, you know what, I'm just going to do it again, and he might do it. So if I was going to pick one, I think I'd pick Warrington to be really switched on and win that fight. But it's interesting.
Definitely, yeah. Hopefully, obviously, Warrington sort of rectifies his mistakes, and it is that victory. A division that you potentially could move into going forward is lightweight, because I think that is the next one up, isn't it, from featherweight? So
No, there's a super feather in between. But
okay.
if I eat lots of cake, then I could probably go to lightweight.
Yeah. To be fair, for me, that's one of the more interesting divisions at the moment. It seems like that's where all like the sort of big money fights are, because you've got Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Lomachenko, Tank Davis. If you were to pick like one that you think would be king of the hill in that scenario, or like rank a couple of them, who would you say is like top of that pile?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Because they're actually all so different. And for example, Teofimo Lopez has already beat Lomachenko,
Mhm.
but I'd still rank Lomachenko higher, even because I think he would beat him in a rematch. It's hard to like. It's so. Um, it's just your opinion, isn't it, or how you see things. But I think skill for skill, Lomachenko is the man. I think he's one of the best fighters I've ever seen in history.
Mhm.
I think Tank has got power that has been sent by the gods. I think power is he's got that. I call it death power. It's like if he hits you, then he's just gonna switch your lights off. I've seen Devin Haney spar in the flesh. He's a masterful boxer. He's very slick. He's very good. Ryan Garcia, he's got some power. He's very fast. He's very flashy. He's got all the charisma and star power. He's got the big backing of the zone. And then Teofimo Lopez, he's the man that beat the man. He's another one. He's completely explosive and very dynamic in the way he fights, and I really like his style. So for me, what a mix of fighters and what a division to be in. I think I'd probably rank Loma at the top, Teofimo second, Tank third, uh, Haney fourth, and Garcia fifth, if I had to. But like I said, it's all subjective, and despite number one being beat by number two, it on different occasions the other way, it might happen different. They might have 10 fights and have 5 wins each. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you. It is really interesting. I think like obviously most of them fighters, bar Lomachenko, are fairly young as well. So I think there's enough fights to go around, and hopefully we can see them fight each other a couple of times in like a little merry-go-round, which would be very nice. I see, like, obviously on your Instagram you alluded to it there. When you were not sparring with, but when you went to go see Devin Haney, was that in America or was that over here?
That was at the Wildcard gym in LA.
And the trainer is Freddie Roach as well. And I'm
Right.
guessing you probably did you get to speak to him, pick his brains, because he's a coaching legend as well.
Yeah, not so much pick his brains, but I did speak to him. Was sparring in his gym, aspired a couple of his fighters. The experience that he's got. You have to respect him. He's done everything. He's trained some absolute legends like James Toney, Manny Pacquiao, people that you look up to from being a kid, and idolize these guys, and he's taught them, probably a lot of what they know. And he's got a wealth of experience. And when you go into them gyms, you see them good fighters, you see world-class operators, and you sort of soak that experience up. And every time you walk into the wild card, that happens.
100%. Speaking about Manny Pacquiao, obviously he's in the welterweight division with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Out of them three, I want to say basically out of Spence and Crawford, but obviously respectfully we'll put money in there as well. But who do you think is on top?
I think pound for pound, I think Crawford is the best, but I take into consideration that Crawford hasn't been at welterweight his whole career. He's moved up from lightweight to light welter to welterweight. I don't know, he's carried his power up, he's carried his skills up, but I feel like he's not naturally as big as Errol Spence.
Mhm.
And I think even though his skill might be better than Errol Spence, I don't know if he'll have enough to nullify Errol Spence's size and presence in that ring. And Pacquiao, you just don't know with him. I thought he was done years ago.
Yeah.
I thought Thurman would take care of him, and at the end of round one, Thurman was on his ass. So, what do I know?
Middleweight's probably the next division, and I don't want to put too many names out here. I just want to say, who do you think, if there is anyone, could beat Canelo in that middleweight, middleweight, and apparently even light heavyweight now? Fuck knows how that's gonna happen. But is there anybody that could beat Canelo?
I think Canelo's a beast, and I think he has so many good attributes, and he uses them so well, and he's got a wealth of experience that he's learned along the way. And he's just a machine. But at the end of the day, he's been beat before, so he's not unbeatable. Mayweather beat him, and
But there's not many Mayweathers in this world.
there's not many Mayweathers, and I'm not saying he might never ever get beat again, but he's been beat before, so it can happen. If you was going to take a fight with Canelo, you can't look at him and say, "Oh, he's unbeatable," or "How am I ever going to win this fight?" Because if you have that attitude, you're never going to win that fight. But I think he's a formidable opponent. He's going to be very hard to beat, but they keep pushing these fighters to go up weights and up weights, and sooner or later they will become unstuck because they're just physically not big enough to win them fights. But I mean, in the middleweight and super middleweight division, there's some great fighters. They're talking about him fighting Caleb Plant next. He's a very, very good fighter. I love watching Caleb Plant. I don't think he's quite good enough to beat Canelo, but I think he's a very good fighter. In our own gym in Rotherham, we've got Lerone Richards. He's British, Commonwealth, European champion. I think his next fight is going to be for another title. So, he's right in that mix to fight Canelo as well. So there's no reason why he can't get that fight, and he's got all the skills in the world. So, it's all to play for, and these big fights can be made.
100%. And we'll finish off with the biggest to last is the heavyweights. Providing that Joshua and Fury both get through their fight, and actually that'll probably be the first question. Do you think both of them win? And then the second question would be, who do you think would win out of them two? Bearing in mind you're in Matchroom's camp, so pick wisely. No, I'm joking.
You need to come back and ask me when they've both come through their fights, because Usyk is an hard fight for Joshua. I do think he wins, but I think it's a very hard fight. And Wilder he's got bombs in either hand, and he could probably knock any man in the world out at any given second. So nothing's a foregone conclusion, and I don't want to jinx it. So you need to ask me when they've got their fights, and hopefully that fight can get made and get over the line.
100%, yeah. Hopefully they do both come through. I said in the Bossy podcast, this was like maybe in September or November-ish, that I actually wanted Joshua to face Usyk before he faced Fury, just because I think it would be interesting to see how he would deal with like someone with such a high boxing IQ, obviously as Fury does as well. So hopefully that puts him in good stead for that fight. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know obviously we overran a tiny bit and we were going a bit longer than expected, but you've been really gracious enough to not sort of say anything or like do the little wrist tapping sort of motion. So I really appreciate that. The way that I like to end each podcast is I ask every guest the same 5 questions in a quick fire fashion. So if we could just rattle through these and then I shall let you go and enjoy your evening. So the first one would be, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of. This isn't going to be quick fire questions because I'm having to think about these quite a lot. Most proud of making my family proud,
What are you most looking forward to?
winning the world title.
What is your biggest motivation?
The Picturing myself lifting the world title.
Yeah. What is your definition of success?
Achieving goals that you set out to do, no matter how big or small. A lot of people have very different goals, and for me, winning a world title is a massive goal. But for other people, someone might be struggling with depression or alcoholism, and having 5 days off the booze or getting off the sofa and going for a walk might be just a bigger success as me winning that world title. So, I think anybody that sets out a goal and achieves it is successful.
100%. And as it's the KultureKast podcast, how do you think your culture has affected you in your journey thus far?
It has made my journey harder because making weight's hard when there's a lot of chapatis flying around and everyone's cooked paneer and all the butter and everything is just soaking into my body. So that's how my culture is affected. Yeah.
Smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. Yeah, again, I thank you for your time. Socials will be left in the link in the description. But again, thank you so much. And is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, thanks for your time, and look forward to listening to more of your interviews.
Smashed it. Thank you very much, Jordan.